One of the main reasons I got my first 3D printer was to make custom case mods and portable handheld consoles. At the time, this channel was primarily a video game hacking and modding channel, and not having a whole lot of tools other than my handy Dremel, I was really excited to see what I could create with a 3D printer. Little did I know I would become completely obsessed with the tool, and many of those initial projects would get pushed off to the side where they still sit today. One of the main reasons was back in 2014, 3D printers were not nearly as good as they are today, they weren't as reliable, and the slicing software itself was also quite bad when you look at it compared to today's standards. But the second and arguably biggest reason was the barrier of entry to get into 3D modeling and design. Having absolutely no background in either of CAD design or any sort of modeling whatsoever, it was incredibly intimidating and felt nearly impossible to make anything that was even remotely complex. Today, that is a different story, and there are a lot of more options and a lot of helpful resources out there to get you going. In today's video, I sort of want to have a rant or discussion talking about what my journey with 3D design and CAD has been like, the various tools I've used, as well as my thoughts on whether 3D design is a necessary part of 3D printing. If 3D modeling or design is something you're interested in after watching this video, I will share with you the tools that I currently use, as well as a handful of resources that should really help you to get up and running and designing parts before you know it. I did want to quickly plug that this Wednesday, May 4th at noon Pacific Standard Time, we are having our 1,000 subscriber giveaway on the ModBotArmy channel. It's going to be an awesome Hangout live stream where we talk about 3D printing, and there is a ton of crazy cool prizes with international shipping. The live stream has been scheduled, so I'll place links in the description over to that if you want to come and hang out. I really hope to see you there. So with all that being said, and without further ado, let's get right to today's video. Before getting into the discussion and sort of cutting to the chase, I do strongly feel that after 7 or 8 years roughly of 3D printing, that every single person that has a 3D printer should and definitely can learn some basic 3D modeling, and it will absolutely help you to get the most use out of your 3D printer. However, I by no means find it to be a prerequisite to getting a 3D printer, and there are a ton of people that don't do any 3D modeling at all and are perfectly happy with their 3D printer. To this day, I would still argue that 95% of the models that I'm 3D printing are things that do already exist out there. That being said, whether it's for a functional part around your house, designing an upgrade to a 3D printer, designing a prop or armor, helping someone in your local community, or saving that knowledge for a rainy day, I can guarantee that you will not be sorry if you take a little bit of time and again, just at least learn some of the basic fundamentals of a 3D CAD or design software. 3D printers are incredible tools, and the ability to create something that is super specific to your exact need is incredibly powerful. Now, just about all of the 3D modeling I do is functional 3D modeling, working with hard surfaces, so that is the main emphasis of what I'll be focusing on today. However, I do have quite a few friends that are way more talented and artsy than I am that can do all sorts of sculpting and organic models, creating things like character models or creating different props, so I will touch on that briefly, but the primary focus is sort of on the functional modeling for hard surfaces. The main tool that you're going to want to get, if you don't already have it, is a set of these, can't even hold it up, handy digital calipers. And there's a lot of different brands out there. Some people swear by the really expensive ones, and I'm not saying that they're not better, but these low-cost, NEIKO is the brand. I got it off of Amazon 5 to 6 years ago. They have been accidentally dropped, kicked, thrown numerous times over the years, and they work excellent. I like these so much that I just went up and picked up a second one the other day just to have around. I'll place links in the description over to those if you want to get these specific ones. You don't have to go with those specific ones, but they've worked well for me, and they're under $30, so I think they are a great value. With that out of the way, let's get into what the sort of journey has been like for me getting into 3D modeling, because there has been quite a bit between me initially trying and where I'm at today. Shortly after I got my first 3D printer and gained some level of successful prints with it, I decided to turn my attention to the 3D design side of things. So, like anybody that's never done something before, I turned to Google and started searching around and just seeing what came up. And at the time, the three main pieces of software I kept seeing was 123D Design, Google's SketchUp, as well as Blender. This isn't including any premium software, like SolidWorks was very much so a thing, but it was well out of my budget, and I spent a little bit of time at least, with Blender, SketchUp, and 123D Design to sort of see what they were all about. Starting off with Blender, it definitely had modeling capabilities baked into it, and quite a bit of it, but it was more organic sculpting style stuff, which wasn't exactly what I was leaning towards, and Blender is this open source, crazy powerful piece of software that does a lot more than just 3D modeling. There's full-blown animation things in there. And so sort of the layout of everything and the tools made it incredibly overwhelming and just an absolute mess for me to navigate. So I fairly quickly wrote Blender off. Again, this is back in 2014, 2015. Next was Google SketchUp, which seemed okay, but it was fairly lackluster and seemed like it was more geared towards architectural type stuff. And I don't even think at the time you could directly export into a printable file type or an STL. You had to use some sort of plugin or third-party site. So I didn't end up using Google SketchUp very much just because, again, it just was sort of plain and didn't have a lot going on. Then there was Autodesk 123D Design, which I believe was also a free piece of software back then, and it by far had, to me, the most intuitive layout, and I spent the most time modeling in there, and that's definitely where the first few models I created came from. However, it was incredibly buggy, and I never knew when an action I was performing would completely crash the software. There was no form of autosave, so I lost a ton of projects and got pretty disheartened early on, spending hours working on something. Yes, I know I should be saving, but when I'm in the zone working on something, it just didn't always occur to me, and so I would lose those files. And 123D Design ended up closing down, or the project ended in 2016, and I cannot say that I was very sorry to see it go. Shortly after 123D Design, which is super fun to say fast, died in 2016, I actually didn't do a whole lot of 3D modeling for a while and sort of just used my 3D printer, downloaded models from Thingiverse, which was the go-to place at the time. It's hard to believe based off of how it performs now. And still sort of kept my ear to the ground, seeing what was out there. I was making content on 3D printers back then as well. And that's when I heard of or discovered a piece of software that was browser-based called TinkerCAD, which basically gave you some sort of rudimentary shapes that allowed you to add them together to create things and sort of subtract different shapes from each other to make different models. Early on, I wrote off TinkerCAD. I thought that it seemed like a cool piece of software, but it seemed like it was aimed more towards children, and I especially felt that way coming from 123D Design and seeing sort of its playful interface. I'm happy to say, or I'm acknowledging that I was absolutely wrong, and my buddy Chuck from Filament Friday embraced it early on, and him, as well as many others, have shown me and shown the world that you can make some very, very complex models in TinkerCAD, and you just have to know how to use the tools, and it's definitely something that is worth looking at. We'll talk a little bit more about TinkerCAD a little bit later on in this video. The other CAD program I started seeing a lot of was Fusion 360, so I downloaded it, I opened it up, and was instantly overwhelmed by the amount of options and tools and things coming from 123D Design. This was like that program, but just so much more. And I closed it and put it off to the side for a little bit, thinking that this is going to be a lot to learn the basics or be able to do anything with. I finally decided enough is enough and opened up Fusion 360, spent the time to play around with it, to at least be dangerous and be able to design some things. And between then and now, I've done a lot more research, watched videos, looked at articles, and played with it a lot more. It has been my primary CAD software for the last 4-ish years, up until about a year ago when I discovered Shapr3d, with the primary reason for me transitioning being that it runs on an iPad Pro, so I can 3D model from anywhere, and I find the mobility aspect of Shapr3d to be incredibly powerful. Next, I want to go a bit more into TinkerCAD, Fusion 360, and Shapr3d to give you some more information and hopefully help you decide which one you want to take a look at or which one seems the most enticing to you. Starting with TinkerCAD, which is a completely browser-based piece of CAD software, and the very cool thing about that, it means that it doesn't matter what sort of operating system you have, as long as you have a browser and the ability to access it, you can 3D model from anywhere. Also, your designs are saved in their cloud platform. You can download them locally, but they are saved there, and anywhere you are, you can log into your account and access those files to once again download them or continue modeling and pick up where you left off. It primarily functions by allowing you to place a range of shapes that you can pick the specific sizes, you can join them together, subtract them from each other, skew them together, do all sorts of different things. I wouldn't say that I feel TinkerCAD is the most efficient or the best option for complex 3D modeling. However, I have been absolutely blown away by the crazy level of complex things I've seen other users create from the platform. So if you have the vision, you can certainly create things very complex like in TinkerCAD. They even added the ability to sort of create these 3D circuits that you can then export the code from, which is super cool for projects. And like I said, I'd written it off for a very long time, but I have no problem in admitting that I was wrong, and considering it's free and you can just log in with your Google account, I would say it's absolutely at least worth opening it up and poking around and seeing what you think. As far as resources go, my buddy Chuck from Filament Friday has a playlist for TinkerCAD with I think something like 16 different lessons. I would highly recommend checking that out because it will show you how to use some of the different tools as well as take you along for some of his projects. TinkerCAD also has some great resources on their website with some great projects, so I will link both of those resources down below so that if you do decide you want to dive a little bit further in, you have both of those at your disposal. Next up, we have Fusion 360, which is an incredibly powerful CAD software that also has CAM functionality. So if you're interested in subtractive manufacturing and generating toolpaths, you can also do that all within the same software suite. Compared to TinkerCAD, Fusion 360 has much more complex features and capabilities. There's a lot of companies that do their full design for their complex assembly or complex prototyping and even the finished product from within Fusion 360. The biggest trade-off, I would say, compared to TinkerCAD though, is that while TinkerCAD does not require any sort of powerful PC because everything's done in the cloud, Fusion 360 can be quite demanding, especially depending on the operation that you're performing. So you will want to make sure you at least have a fairly up-to-date PC if you don't want to be sitting there waiting for different actions to actually perform. Fusion 360 intimidated me heavily at first, but if you take the time to learn the basics as far as creating sketches, setting constraints, and doing a couple of practical projects, you can very quickly pick up enough to do some of your own designs. And if there's a certain tool that maybe you want to learn a bit more about, or a certain application you're trying to perform, I would always just work on things until I got stuck, do a quick search for what I'm trying to do, and find someone else that had an article or a video or resource on that specific task. One of my absolute favorite features of Fusion 360 is the timeline down below. Every time you perform any action in Fusion 360, it adds another step to your timeline. So if you get to a certain point and you're like, oh snap, four things ago, I wish I had set this value to 10 millimeters instead of 12 millimeters, you can just double click on that and it will take you back to that step. It will allow you to change that value and then it'll jump you back to the current step you were on prior to that. And it works 95% of the time. Every once in a while, depending on how I've created a model, when I change something in the timeline, it breaks everything after it. But for the most part, it is an incredibly powerful feature of Fusion 360. Fusion 360 is a paid program, but it does have free options for students, hobbyists, as well as startups with some limitations. Hands down, the biggest help for me learning Fusion 360 is another channel ran by Lars Cristienson. It's actually called that. He is awesome and has a insane amount of tutorials on Fusion 360. If you are able to follow all of his tutorials from beginning to end, you will quite literally be a Fusion 360 master. There are just so many videos covering the different tools, covering different projects. So if you just sit there and say, hey, I'm gonna watch a video a day for the next 90 days, by the end of that 90 days, you are going to be an absolute rock star with Fusion 360. Another awesome resource is Product Design Online, which is another YouTube channel. I hadn't discovered his work until much more recently, but his videos are top-notch, his tutorials are fantastic, so I will place both of those channels in the description. You can sort of decide for yourself which one you like better or which one sort of works better for your style of learning. Next up, we have Shapr3d, which has a free license that lets you do the 3D modeling side of things, but as soon as you want to export high quality models to 3D print, you're going to want to pay for their pro license, which is $20 a month if you pay yearly, so in one lump sum, and that is currently the tier I'm paying for. It gives you unlimited projects and unlimited exports. As mentioned a little bit earlier, the main reason Shapr3d caught my eye is that I bought an iPad Pro for some various tasks relating to YouTube, and the Fusion 360 works on Windows as well as Mac and probably Linux, but there's no form of mobile solution for it. And Shapr3d was originally designed for the iPad Pro, so it integrates very, very nicely and runs very smoothly on the iPad hardware. And the ability to 3D model from anywhere and not having to have an incredibly beefy laptop is something that to me is super powerful. If you're somebody that's 3D modeling for business, or you're going to be out in the field looking at, I don't know, customers' thing that they want you to prototype or whatever, the ability to have your digital calipers and your iPad right there and do some basic modeling it's pretty awesome. And I would argue that Shapr3d, in my opinion, using it's much more intuitive than Fusion 360. Like, most people should probably be able to open that up and just go with modeling, while Fusion 360, it's probably going to take you a little bit longer. Not saying Shapr3d or Fusion 360 is one is better than the other. It's heavily personal preference, but the main drawback of Shapr3d was that when I started using it, it was just for the iPad. Well, they've since released a full version on Mac, so you have it for Mac OS, and they have, it was in beta last time I checked, but it seemed very, very stable, a version also for Windows. So the ability to 3D model from all the different platforms is awesome. Currently, the limitation that kind of bums me out is that your files are only saved locally. So if I'm working on my iPad and I want to use it on my Mac, I have to airdrop it myself, but they are supposed to be releasing some sort of a cloud service that will sync your design between all the different OSs through your account, and I am super excited and looking forward to that for efficiency and being able to just bounce from device to device and continue working on a 3D model. If you are watching this and you're new to 3D modeling, this might not mean much to you, but Fusion 360 uses something called parametric modeling, and Shapr3d uses something called direct modeling, and they are fairly two different styles of 3D modeling. I will place a link in the description so you can check them out, but that is sort of the main thing that sets them apart. And some people love parametric so much that they will say, nope, Shapr3d is not for me. But for what I do, the direct modeling has worked really well, and it allows me to get up and running very, very quickly. For Shapr3d, the main resources are actually Shapr3d's YouTube channel. They've been putting out a video a week for years at this point. There's an insane amount of tutorials from everything from woodworking to complex product design to some modeling for 3D printing. So definitely check out their channel. Also, Product Design Online that I mentioned for Fusion 360 started a new channel for Shapr3d that's specifically focused on Shapr3d, and he has a series. It's Learn Shapr3d maybe in 10 days, in a certain amount of days, and his video guides on that are amazing. So I'll place that playlist as well as the Shapr3d YouTube channel in the description so you can check out both of those. Other platforms I've heard good things about that I haven't played with myself is FreeCAD, which is an open source parametric modeling software. Again, haven't used it at all, but I've seen through the interwebs and a lot of people I interact with that there are definitely quite a few users using that. Also, SolidWorks has SolidWorks Maker, I believe it's called, and when I checked on it, it looked like the price was $100 per year. I have no idea what the limitations are compared to the full-blown version of SolidWorks, but if you are a SolidWorks person, or if you interact with people that or want to learn SolidWorks but don't want to spend the money, that might be a great option for you. Again, I can't say definitively because I haven't used it, but it's something that may be worth looking into. As I mentioned, I don't really do any sculpting or organic modeling, but I have a ton of friends that do, and the two main pieces of software I see them using are either Blender or Zbrush. Blender has had some serious overhauls since I used it back in 2015, and it is now a much better and I would say more powerful 3D modeling software. It's also open source and free to use, so that if you're interested in sort of character modeling or prop making, that may be a really cool software for you to check out. Many of my friends that are making props, characters, or cosplay on sort of more of a professional or for work type situation are using Zbrush, and Zbrush right now, when I looked, it looks like it's $30 a month if you pay for a year up front, but Zbrush seems to be almost like an industry standard. I would highly recommend, again, if you're interested in that sort of sculpting and organic type of 3D modeling, taking a look at that, because not that you cannot do it in Blender, and again, not the right person to ask about the main key differences, but I've just seen some of the most insane 3D models of my life coming out of Zbrush. So it is absolutely a very powerful software, but again, you are paying for those tools and features as it's meant to be more of a professional or prosumer software package. I've designed my fair share of items or models over the years, but I am far from an expert and I still have a lot of room to grow and a lot of things to learn. I really enjoy being able to design things around here, whether that's a custom bracket, some sort of mounting solution, or some sort of storage solution. I just think that having the ability to do some 3D design and some CAD work is just so powerful and also a very rewarding feeling. There has never been a better time than now to watch some videos and learn the basics of 3D design. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that I gave you some things to consider, some resources, and maybe a better understanding of what it takes to get into some of these different things. Believe me, as someone that has no background in this stuff, if I can learn the basics of 3D modeling, you can absolutely do. And I'm telling you, it might look intimidating, but if you give yourself a chance and don't look at someone that's been 3D modeling for 5 or 6 years, because that's not a fair comparison. Just give yourself some small steps and some tiny projects that are achievable, and before you know it, you'll be modeling complex things, of course, if that's something that you are wanting to evolve to. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite design software is if you're doing some 3D modeling, and also if you have any resources for any of the viewers or even myself. I'm always looking for amazing resources that I can learn more as well as share with others. Please place a link in the comments down below over to those, and I will absolutely check those out. On that note, don't forget to like and subscribe for more great videos. We make a video every single week, so there's always fresh content coming your way. And if you want to support the channel furthermore, I'll place links down below in the description over to our Patreon, where there are some really awesome rewards. Huge thank you to all of our existing Patreon supporters. I appreciate each and every one of you, allowing me to come back every single week and spend more time doing what I love, which is making content for you all to enjoy. On that note, this has been Daniel from ModBot, and I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video. Peace, guys!